All right, Miss A here. We are quickly going to look over clauses. So your goal in this lesson is to identify whether the clause is independent or dependent, and if the clause is dependent, determine what type of dependent clause it is. So here we go. A clause, and you should be annotating, is a group of words that has both a subject and a verb. Looking in the chart here, a independent clause can stand by itself as a sentence. So what do we mean by that? And we can also mark it up here. An independent clause has a subject and a verb and can stand by itself as a sentence. So here is an example. When she heard the news, she was delighted. The independent clause is what is underlined. If I only take the independent clause, she was delighted, it has a subject, she, it has a verb, was. What was she? She was delighted. Complete thought, so it is an independent clause. Now, down here, these three are what we call dependent clauses. So all three of these are dependent clauses. So what is a dependent clause? So we come up here, let's take a look. A dependent or subordinate clause has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. So we have three types of dependent clauses. So some things to look for. This isn't always true, but they've given you some possible words to look for as clue words. So adverb clauses could start with although, when, or because. Relative clauses could start with who, whom, whose, which, or that. And then moving down to the bottom, and you can go ahead and, my little writing thing is in the way. But down with the noun clauses, you also have some clue words. But that's not always true. There are other words they could start with. So we need to look at what they do. What do each one of these do for the main part of the sentence? How do they add to the thought? So here, the trip was pleasant because we took our time. So this clause gives us detail on the action. So what was the event or action? Well, it was the trip. Well, what was the trip? Well, the trip was pleasant. So the verb phrase, the action phrase was pleasant. So I'll put a box around that. So it gives us some information about why the trip was pleasant. Well, the trip was pleasant because we took our time. So it acts as an adverb. It gives more detail about the action in the sentence. A relative clause acts as an adjective, so it's going to give more detail about some type, and this can get confusing because it's very similar to noun clause. It can give some information about a noun in the sentence. So here, her writing is the kind that the critics adore. So you ask yourself, what do the critics adore? They adore her writing. So we're giving some detail on a noun. So her writing is a noun. So here, adverb giving more detail on the action. Here, giving more detail on a noun. So I'm going to put this out to the side. More detail on the action. More detail on the noun. or well, I'm not going to say subject, noun. All right, so you could get that confused with noun clause, right? The big difference is it acts as a noun. So the relative clause gives more detail about another noun. The noun clause gives, or excuse me, acts as a noun. So here, whatever the town decides about the zoning, we will finish the construction. This clause refers to, and this takes some thought, this clause refers to a decision. So that decision is in itself a noun. And my computer wants to be grumpy with me, so I apologize for that. Okay, so thought we'd do a little zoom in, zoom out action. That was fun. Okay, so you might want to stop here. We are 6 minutes in. Make sure you have the annotations you need, and I know they all went away, but remember, you can rewind. I am going to pause for a minute, or you pause me, actually. Make sure you have, share with a partner, make sure everyone has the right annotation. And you might do a little quizzing session with each other. You could ask your partner, what is an adverb clause? And they could say, well, it acts as an adverb. So you could do a little bit of that action. Okay? So after you do that, we can come back and we're going to do these practice problems. Okay, you've probably or hopefully paused me. Welcome back. All right, so something else to note. In a sentence with 2 or more clauses, you may need a comma between the clauses. For instance, you usually need a comma between an adverb clause and an independent clause. So something to keep in mind. Identify each underlying clause by adding IND for independent clause or SUB for subordinate clause. So you need to have a strategy. One good strategy is first to figure out whether it's, actually this is pretty easy. They just want you to figure out if it's dependent or independent. All right, so they're putting subordinate here, but that also, remember, if you go back to the top, it's another word for dependent clause. And let me type that in there. They love to make it crazy, don't they? All right, so subordinate's another word for dependent. All right, so let's look at the first one. Until the Spanish came along. Well, that doesn't feel like a thought to me. Why are we reading about the Spanish, right? What happened when the Spanish came along, right? So this doesn't sit as its own thought. Until the Spanish came along, the Inca had a large empire. So let's look at the other piece. The Inca had a large empire. Does that stand alone? Yeah. So how do these two pieces connect? Well, until the Spanish came along, the Inca had a large empire. Well, the Inca had a large empire for a long time. Well, what happened? It sounds like they didn't have a large empire when the Spanish came along. Okay, so this is subordinate or dependent. It does not stand on its own. Okay, next one. The Inca were skilled engineers who built vast networks of roads. So again, just read that one piece. Who built vast networks of road? Who built vast networks of roads? Sounds like a question to me. So that's not a complete thought. When you read that, you're like, who built vast networks of roads? Also, you realize the Inca were skilled engineers who built vast networks of roads. Well, who built them? The Inca built them. Okay, so this is a relative dependent clause. So again, this is what? subordinate. All right. Number 3, if they cooperated with the Inca, local leaders could stay in power. So let's read this piece by itself. Local leaders could stay in power. That sounds like a complete thought to me. You have local leaders. What could they do? Well, they could stay in power. So we have local leaders could. What could they do? They could stay in power. So I have a complete thought with both a subject and a verb. So this third one is independent. Okay, now I need you to pause me, try the ones, the 4, 5, and 6, and then come back and see if they are correct. Okay, welcome back. Underline the subordinate clause in each sentence and then write the type of clause it is on the line. Okay, Lena is not responsible for what her brother decided to do. So let's start by looking for the complete thought. So Lena is not responsible. That is a complete thought. What is adding to this complete thought? Well, for what her brother decided to do is telling us what Lena is not responsible for. So what is she not responsible for? She is not responsible for what her brother decided to do. So then we come up and we say, this seems like I see a dependent clause. All right. We look for the word for. We don't see the word for, but that's okay. So we underline the word or the clause for what her brothers decided to do. That is what Lena is not responsible for. So it's giving us some detail on a noun. So this is an adverbial clause. So let's put here adverbial, an adjective clause. I apologize. This is an adjective clause. So adjective clause. And just to remind you, adjective clauses are also called relative clauses. So let's use what they have. So it is a relative clause. Number 5, kangaroos are in the macropod family, which also includes wallabies. All right, where is our complete thought? Kangaroos are. What are they? In the macropod family. So I see a dependent clause. Your dependent clause is which also includes wallabies. All right, what is it giving us information on? It is giving us information on the macropod family. So we come up here, we look for the word which. We see the word which, that further cements our thought. So we have another relative clause. So we have one relative clause. We have another relative clause. All right. Number 6. Since he was working late, Michael ate dinner at his office. So where is my complete thought? Michael ate dinner at the office. Okay. So here is our dependent. So right here is our our dependent clause. Since he was working late, Michael ate dinner at the office. So what is this telling us about? Well, it's telling us about the event of eating dinner at the office, right? So remember, the ones that tell us about or give more detail on events, those are your adverbial clauses. Okay, so again, this takes practice. It takes some inference. On the back, you're going to underline the